Welcome to History Teller YT, where stories of the past come alive, connecting us to our roots, culture, and heritage. Today, we journey into the heart of Lapuyan, long before it became a town with churches, schools, and modern settlements. Before any of this, the land was ruled by rivers, forests, and mountains, and the people who lived here, the Subanen, existed in deep harmony with nature and the spirits that guided them. This is the story of the Imbing Clan, a family whose leadership spanned generations, bridging the past with the present. From the first known chief, Gumabongabon, to leaders like Timuay Imbing, Datu Lumok Imbing, and Mangura Vicente L. Imbing, each generation faced the challenge of preserving culture, administering justice, and guiding their people while adapting to external influences. The Imbing Clan journey is not just about governance or ancestry. It is a tale of resilience, wisdom, and the enduring connection between people and their land. In this video, you will explore the oral traditions, rituals, and wisdom that have sustained the Subanen people. You will witness how the Imbing leaders negotiated with colonial powers, integrated modern education while preserving ancestral knowledge, and safeguarded their environment, festivals, and spiritual practices. From ancestral land stewardship to traditional healing and governance, this history reveals how leadership is measured not by power alone, but by fairness, vision, and the courage to honor the past while guiding the future. So, sit back, immerse yourself, and let the saga of the Imbing Clan unfold. By the end of this journey, you will understand why their legacy is still spoken with reverence in the forests, rivers, and homes of Lapuyan. Get ready to experience centuries of Subanen heritage, leadership, and cultural wisdom, because this is more than history. It is a living testament to the human spirit. Long before Lapuyan was marked on any map, before foreign ships touched Mindanao's shores, the land lived in silence and rhythm with nature. The Subanen, the river people, believed that the rivers were veins of the earth, the forests were its lungs, and the mountains were its bones. They did not look at the land as property, but as kin, living, breathing, and deserving of respect. Each tree cut was spoken to. Each river crossed was prayed upon. Each mountain climbed was honored with ritual. This was the beginning of a worldview where spirit and soil were never separated. The Subanen people did not live above the land. They lived within it. Their villages were small, made of bamboo and nipa, scattered along rivers where water and fish were plentiful. They moved often, not because they were restless, but because the land demanded balance. If soil grew tired, they let it rest. If rivers changed course, they followed its new path. To them, life was not about conquering nature, but listening to it. And within this harmony, leaders emerged. Not kings or warriors, but Timuay, those who could listen best to the voices of both people and spirits. These leaders were not chosen by blood alone, but by wisdom, fairness, and the ability to keep peace. In their memory, stories were told, songs were sung, and names were carried forward like fire handed from torch to torch. Among the earliest remembered in Lapuyan's oral chain of chiefs was Gumabongabon, the first known Timuay. The Subanen had already been migrating across Samboanga Peninsula, finding rivers to settle near. Gumabongabon was the one who guided these early movements, making sure the people did not scatter too far, that they carried the same law, the same rituals, wherever they went. Oral tradition says he had the patience of a mountain and the voice of a river. Firm, steady, but never violent. His role was not only to settle disputes among families, but also to protect the tribe from outsiders. During his leadership, intrusions were rare, for the Subanen were not yet faced with the colonizers who would later shape their destiny. His legacy was in unity, He bound people together not with force, but with memory and ritual. He is remembered as the trunk from which branches of leaders would later grow. After him came Dajending, his son, who carried on the role with the same commitment to unity. Dajending kept the tribe together, ensuring that migration never turned into division. From these first leaders onward, a chain of names was preserved, not written on paper but etched in hearts and tongues, repeated in councils and fireside stories. To speak these names was to keep the ancestors alive, to remind each new generation that they were never walking alone, but always accompanied by those who had walked before. The Subanen way of governance was unlike the kingdoms and sultanates that surrounded them. They did not have thrones or palaces. Their law was called Gukum, a system based on fairness, community judgment, and reconciliation. When two families quarreled, they did not rush to punish. They sat in circles, spoke with calm voices, and sought a way for both sides to be healed, not just silenced. In this way, peace was not the absence of conflict, but the constant tending of relationships. At the heart of their culture was the bucklog, the great Thanksgiving ritual. This was more than a dance. It was a living bridge between humans and the unseen. The bucklog was held when blessings came, after a bountiful harvest, after peace was restored, or when leaders needed to call upon the spirits for strength. Wooden platforms were built, and as dancers moved, the earth itself seemed to echo their steps. The rhythm reminded the Subanen that life was not theirs alone, but shared with the land and the unseen beings dwelling within it. In this balance of governance and ritual, leaders were shaped. Each Timuay was not simply a chief, but a guardian of law, of peace, and of ritual. This was the world that would give birth to the ancestral line of the Imbing Clan, a world where names lived in memory, where law lived in circles, and where dance kept the heartbeat of people alive. After Dajending, the Subanen remembered Balis, a leader known for his firmness yet fair judgment. Balis was not a man easily swayed by emotion, but neither was he cruel. His reign was marked by careful balance. He understood that a leader must sometimes say no to even his closest kin if it meant protecting the harmony of the tribe. Oral tradition tells of disputes over land boundaries. When two families argued about who could farm a certain piece of soil, Balis would not simply hand victory to one side. Instead, he walked the land himself, listened to both sides, and then decided in such a way that neither family lost their dignity. His wisdom kept the Subanen united in a time when disunity could mean hunger. Following Balis came Baan, remembered most of all for his defense of Subanen lands against intruders. By this time, waves of migration from neighboring regions had begun pressing closer. Outsiders sought fertile soil, rivers full of fish, and forest resources. Baan understood that once land was lost, it would be nearly impossible to reclaim. Thus, he took it upon himself to act as both protector and negotiator. He organized his people not as soldiers, but as guardians. When others attempted to encroach, he stood at the boundary and demanded respect. His legacy was one of vigilance. The people saw him as a shield, ensuring that the future generations would still have land to cultivate and rivers to fish. Together, Balis and Baan represented two faces of Subanen leadership: the judge who maintained fairness, and the protector who ensured survival. Their stories passed down through oral tradition were not just memories. They became lessons, told again and again to remind future chiefs that leadership was a trust, not a privilege. The next remembered names in the Subanen lineage are Palyalai and Habali, leaders whose gifts were not in warfare or land defense, but in strengthening the spiritual fabric of their people. Palyalai, it is said, had a voice that carried like the wind. He was a singer of chants, keeper of prayers, and guardian of ritual knowledge. During his leadership, the bucklog was performed with renewed vigor. People from far-flung settlements came together, uniting not just as families, but as a nation bound by sacred rhythm. Paliuli reminded the people that survival was not only about food and land, but also about remembering the spirits who guided the rivers and forests. He was, in many ways, a cultural weaver, one who ensured that the threads of ritual remained unbroken. Habali, who followed, became known as a peacemaker. Among the Subanen, quarrels between families were not uncommon. Disputes over marriages, debts, or even hunting grounds could spark tension. Habali's gift was in soothing hearts before anger hardened into hatred. He believed that no family should carry wounds into the next generation. With patience, he brought quarrelsome families into council circles and urged them to see beyond pride. He believed that forgiveness was as important as justice. Under Habali, peace between clans was maintained and feuds were avoided. His memory lives on as a symbol of reconciliation. Together, Paliuli and Habali strengthened what it meant to be Subanen, to live not only in balance with land but also with each other. They taught that without peace within, there could be no true peace with the spirits or the earth. As the chain of memory continued, names like Pamazin, Samaya, Lapuyan, Sanaira, and Palaganding carried the Subanen through generations. Pamazin is remembered as the one who expanded settlements. He encouraged his people to spread outward, to clear new fields, to settle along fresh rivers. Under his guidance, the Subanen no longer feared moving into unknown territory, for Pamazin always reminded them that the spirits would travel with them wherever they went. Expansion meant survival, and his foresight ensured that the tribe did not grow stagnant. Then came Samaya, known as the Keeper of Law. He strengthened Gukum, ensuring that even as settlements spread, the same code of fairness held them together. Oral tradition says he was strict but respected. Families knew that when Samaya presided, there would be no favoritism, only justice. Lapuyan, who followed, was remembered as a wise mediator. He often traveled between far-flung Subanen communities, listening to disputes, carrying messages, and ensuring that no group felt abandoned by the larger whole. His ability to listen and mediate made him beloved across settlements. Sanaira, by contrast, was remembered for generosity. He shared food freely in times of famine, gave land to those who had none, and reminded the people that leadership meant giving, not taking. Oral memory speaks of a time when he opened his granary during a poor harvest, feeding families who would otherwise have starved. Finally, there was Palaganding, who guided the people through hardship. His leadership was marked by scarcity and difficulty, yet he held the people together. Instead of despair, he encouraged cooperation, reminding them that survival was possible when all worked as one. He is remembered not for wealth or success, but for perseverance in adversity. By the time Lumok, the father of Imbing, emerged as chief, the Subanen had carried centuries of leadership shaped by judges, protectors, peacemakers, and guardians of ritual. Each name was a torch, passed forward until it would eventually light the way for the most remembered leader of all, Imbing, who would face the greatest transformation of their world with both courage and wisdom. Before the name Imbing echoed in every council circle of Lapuyan, there was his father, Lumok, the last chief remembered in the long chain of oral lineage. Lumok lived in a time of quiet change, when whispers of foreign presence were beginning to reach the rivers and forests of the Subanen. He was not remembered for grand wars or dramatic decisions, but for being the parent of the one who would carry the clan into an entirely new world. Oral stories tell that Lumok raised his son with a deep respect for Gukum, customary law, Buklog rituals, and the sacred connection to the land. Imbing grew up sitting near firelit circles, listening as elders debated justice, and he watched the dignity with which his father presided. From Lumok, he inherited patience. From his ancestors, he inherited memory. When Imbing was young, the Subanen still moved between forests and rivers, living semi-nomadic lives, but the first footprints of outsiders were becoming visible. Traders passed through, bringing stories of faraway powers. Rumors of government officials and missionaries crept closer. Lumok prepared his son not by warning him against strangers, but by teaching him the strength of Subanen law and ritual. If you know who you are, oral tradition paraphrases his wisdom, then no outsider can erase you. Thus, the boy who would grow into Timuay Imbing was trained not as a warrior, but as a bridge, though no one yet realized how vital that role would be. When Lumok passed, Imbing did not simply inherit a title. He inherited centuries of ancestral weight, names carried from Gumabongabon down to his father. The chain was now his to carry forward. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, the world of the Subanen was shifting faster than ever before. Spain had already fallen in the Philippines, and the Americans were now the new colonial rulers. To administer far-flung regions like Zamboanga, they created systems of local governance, one of which was the tribal ward in Lapuyan, specifically for the Subanen people. The colonial officials needed a leader who could command respect, someone the Subanen themselves trusted. Without hesitation, the people pointed to Imbing. His reputation for fairness, calm judgment, and wisdom was already known. He was chosen not because the Americans decreed it, but because his people recognized his authority. As Timuay Labi, paramount chief, Imbing now stood in a delicate position. On one side were his people, bound by Gukum and the spirits of the land. On the other were the Americans, bringing new systems of governance, schools, and missions. Many chiefs in other areas rejected foreign intrusion, fearing that their traditions would be erased. But Imbing saw something different. He understood that survival was not only about resistance, but also about adaptation. He did not see the world as a wall where two sides must clash, but as a bridge where different paths could meet. This is why history remembers him as the bridge, one who stood firmly rooted in Subanen tradition, yet extended a hand to outsiders. His challenge was immense: how to welcome change without letting it destroy identity. It was in this balance that his legacy began to take shape. In 1912, missionaries from the Christian and Missionary Alliance, CNMA, arrived in Lapuyan. For the Subanen, this was a turning point. Many chiefs elsewhere closed their doors, refusing to let foreigners meddle in the sacred fabric of their lives. But Imbing made a decision that would forever alter the course of his people. He welcomed the missionaries. He gave them land, allowed them to build homes, and permitted them to establish a school. This was not blind submission. It was strategic wisdom. Imbing recognized that education and knowledge of the outside world would become vital tools for the Subanen survival in a rapidly changing Philippines. By opening the door, he ensured that his people would not be left behind. Yet, importantly, Imbing never abandoned tradition. Even as the first Protestant church rose in Lapuyan, making it the birthplace of Protestant Christianity among the Subanen, the Timuay continued to preside over Buklog rituals, reminding his people that the spirits of the land must never be forgotten. He sat in councils of Gukum, reminding them that customary law still ruled their lives, even if outsiders brought new rules. For Imbing, the arrival of new faith did not mean the death of the old ways. Instead, he sought balance. Old and new, tradition and change, earth and heaven. when he passed around 1920, the grief of his people was not only for the man, but for the bridge he had built. Yet the line did not end. His descendants, beginning with Datu, Lumok, Imbing, would continue shaping the Subanen journey into the modern world. When Timuay Imbing passed away around 1920, his people grieved, but they also looked for who would carry the torch forward. The mantle of leadership fell not on the eldest, but on the second son, Lumok, who would later be remembered as Datu Lumok Imbing. Where his father had been a bridge between two worlds, Lumok became a builder of foundations. The world he inherited was already transforming. Protestant missions were now rooted in Lapuyan. Schools had begun teaching Subanen children the letters and numbers of a new age, and the Philippine state was slowly tightening its grasp on local governance. For the Subanen, survival no longer depended solely on navigating spirits and rivers. It also meant navigating bureaucracy, education, and the cash economy. Datu Lumok understood this clearly. Oral memory says he often told his people, "The time of walking forests endlessly is passing. We must plant roots." With this vision, he began guiding his people toward permanent settlements. Unlike generations before, who moved frequently to allow land to rest, Lumok encouraged building fixed homes in Lapuyan. He saw stability as a shield. A permanent village meant schools could thrive, farms could grow, and outsiders could recognize Subanen as a people with established rights. It was not an easy transition. Many elders resisted, saying the spirits demanded mobility, that to stay too long in one place would anger the land. But Lumok was patient. He reminded them that rituals like the bucklog could still honor the spirits even if families stayed rooted. Slowly, through persuasion rather than force, he shifted the Subanen way of life toward permanence, a decision that would shape generations. If his father's gift to the Subanen was openness to outsiders, Lumok's gift was the planting of coconuts. He urged families to plant coconut trees, knowing they would one day provide food, drink, oil, and most importantly, livelihood. At first, many resisted. Planting coconuts meant patience, years of waiting before the first harvest. Hunters and gatherers found it difficult to imagine working for a future they could not immediately enjoy. But Lumok insisted, saying, "A tree planted today feeds your children tomorrow." Under his encouragement, coconuts spread across Lapuyan's hills, eventually becoming the backbone of the local economy for decades to come. Generations of Subanen would later look back and see that their survival in the modern world was tied directly to this foresight. Alongside coconuts, Lumok was deeply committed to education. He believed that if the Subanen children did not learn, they would forever be pushed aside in a Philippines dominated by other groups. He urged parents to send their children to the schools that missionaries had built, even when it meant sacrificing helping hands in the farms. Many elders doubted this choice, fearing that schooling would make children forget their traditions. But Lumok argued the opposite, that education was not an enemy, but a tool. He himself told stories by firelight, passing down legends like the legend of the bucklog to his grandson, so that knowledge of the spirits and rituals would remain alive alongside the knowledge of books. In this way, he balanced two worlds just as his father had done, but with a firmer focus on practical survival in the 20th century. Through coconuts and classrooms, Lumok reshaped Lapuyan into a community rooted in both land and knowledge. The true measure of Lumok's vision came in 1957, when Lapuyan officially became a municipality. This transformation from a tribal ward into a recognized municipality symbolized that the Subanen were no longer merely wards under the watch of outsiders, but active participants in governance. It was the fruit of seeds planted by both his father and himself. Imbing, who welcomed education and governance, and Lumok, who made sure his people were ready to embrace it. To be alive in that year was to see the world of the Subanen redefined. They were no longer just river people or forest dwellers. They were citizens of a municipality recognized by law, connected to the wider Philippines. Lumok's leadership was remembered as firm but gentle. He did not force his people into change, but guided them steadily, persuading, teaching, and leading by example. Even as coconuts became the new foundation of their economy, he ensured the bucklog continued, keeping alive the sacred dance of Thanksgiving. Even as children learned to read in classrooms, he told them the stories of ancestors so they would never forget where they came from. His genius was not in rejecting the old nor blindly embracing the new, but in weaving them together. When Datu Lumok Imbing passed in 1958, the grief of his people was mingled with pride. He left behind not only land and trees, but also a community more stable, more literate, and more prepared for the storms of the future. His name became synonymous with reform and vision, the leader who gave his people roots without cutting off their wings. He was remembered as the reformer, and his footsteps paved the way for the next generation, most notably his grandson, Timuay Mangura Vicente L, Imbing, who would carry the Subanen spirit into the modern era with renewed strength. When Datu Lumok Imbing passed in 1958, his legacy lived on not only through the coconuts he had urged his people to plant or the schools he had insisted they attend, but also through the stories he had carefully entrusted to his family. Among his grandchildren was Mangura Vicente L, Imbing, who grew up in a world far more modern than that of his ancestors, yet never untouched by the whispers of tradition. Born into a Lapuyan that was already a municipality, Mangura inherited both the pride of belonging to the Imbing Clan and the burden of carrying forward its centuries-old responsibility. He was raised hearing the legend of the bucklog, a sacred story that had been passed from elder to child since the days of Palyali. But unlike many of his peers, he carried that story not only as entertainment, but as a responsibility. The world around him was changing rapidly. Radios began reaching homes, roads were being built, and the presence of government agencies became stronger. Christianity, first welcomed by his grandfather Imbing, had now become deeply rooted in Lapuyan, with churches and schools shaping the daily lives of many Subanen. Yet alongside this, the oral traditions of the tribe were at risk. Younger generations, busy with studies or work, often listened less to the old chants and rituals. Some even thought of them as relics of the past. It was into this environment that Mangura grew, realizing that his task was not simply to live as a Subanen, but to bear the culture itself, ensuring that memory would not fade. This responsibility would define his leadership and make him remembered as the culture bearer of his time. By the time Mangura Vicente rose as a Timuay, the Subanen people were no longer isolated river settlers. They were citizens of a young Philippine republic, expected to participate in politics, pay taxes, and follow state laws. For many indigenous communities, this period was one of rapid assimilation, often leading to the erosion of identity. But for the Subanen of Lapuyan, the presence of a leader like Mangura offered a different path. He stepped into councils where decisions about ancestral lands and governance were being debated. He spoke not only as a barangay leader or municipal representative, but as a Timuay rooted in oral law. Mangura advocated for the recognition of ancestral domain, insisting that the Subanen had lived on these lands long before papers and titles were introduced by the government. He defended the right of the community to continue governing themselves through gukum, their traditional system of justice, which prioritized reconciliation and fairness over punishment. In public spaces, he reminded both Subanen and non-Subanen alike that progress without tradition is emptiness. Roads and schools may bring convenience, but without rituals, stories, and memory, a people lose their soul. For this reason, he made sure that the bucklog was not forgotten. Each time the platform was raised and the great Thanksgiving dance performed, Mangura was there, ensuring that the spirits of the land were honored. In his view, modernization could be accepted, but never at the cost of the Subanen heart. Mangura Vicente's greatest legacy was not a road built, a law passed, or a field planted. It was the survival of the bucklog into the modern age. In many places, indigenous rituals were abandoned as younger generations chose new religions or migrated to cities. But Mangura stood firm. He told the youth that the bucklog was not superstition. It was the Subanen's heartbeat, a thanksgiving to both Creator and spirits that had carried them for centuries. He explained that the bucklog was not in conflict with Christianity, but could exist alongside it, much like his grandfather Imbing had believed. By framing the ritual as heritage, not idolatry, he protected it from erasure. Through his leadership, the Subanen of Lapuyan became known across Mindanao as keepers of tradition. Anthropologists, cultural workers, and even government agencies came to witness the bucklog, documenting it as one of the most important living rituals in the Philippines. But for Mangura, recognition was not the goal. His goal was simple: that every Subanen child should know the rhythm of the bucklog, should hear the chants, should feel the vibration of the earth when the platform shook beneath their feet. In doing so, he ensured that the culture was not just remembered in books, but lived in bodies, voices, and communities. By the time of his later years, Mangura Vicente L, Imbing had secured his place in the long chain of Subanen leaders. He was remembered as the culture bearer, the one who ensured that traditions survived modernization, that stories were not silenced by textbooks, and that rituals remained alive even in a world of machines and governments. His life was proof that to carry a culture is not to stand still, but to walk forward while holding the past firmly in one's hands. By the dawn of the 21st century, the world of the Subanen was more interconnected than ever. Roads connected Lapuyan to bustling cities. Radios gave way to televisions, and eventually, mobile phones brought distant voices into palm-sized screens. For many indigenous groups, this flood of technology and modernization meant the steady erosion of old traditions. Yet in Lapuyan, the Imbing Clan remained a pillar. The name carried weight not only because of its ancestry, but also because the descendants of Imbing continued to embody leadership in both traditional and modern forms. In barangays across Lapuyan, Imbing descendants stepped into roles as captains, counselors, and community organizers. They represented their people in municipal offices, ensuring that Subanen voices were not drowned out by the louder machinery of Philippine politics. Some became educators, teaching children not just how to read and write, but also how to honor their heritage. Others acted as tribal elders, presiding over gukum sessions where disputes were still resolved according to Subanen custom. These dual roles, one foot in government, the other in tradition, mirrored the balance their ancestor Timuay Imbing had first set in motion a century earlier. For the people, hearing the name Imbing in a council meeting or at the start of a bucklog still carried a deep resonance. It was more than a surname. It was a living reminder of centuries of leadership. Every decision, every public act by a descendant was measured against the long shadow of Imbing, Lumok, and Mangura Vicente. And though times had changed, the weight of that legacy remained as heavy and as guiding as ever. If politics and governance were one pillar of modern Imbing descendants, culture was the other. Even as young Subanen moved to cities for work or studied in universities far from Lapuyan, the clan ensured that the bucklog was not forgotten. Cultural workers within the family partnered with elders to document chants, rebuild ritual platforms, and organize performances that were not just spectacles for outsiders, but living acts of thanksgiving. They reminded their people that Bucklog was not entertainment, it was identity. In gatherings, Imbing descendants spoke about the sacredness of rivers and forests, echoing the voices of their earliest ancestors. They joined hands with NGOs and government agencies working to preserve indigenous heritage, ensuring that the Subanen were not erased in the tide of modernization. In schools, they encouraged children to learn both Subanen language and Filipino, to be fluent in the modern world but still rooted in the tongue of their ancestors. The role of women in the clan also grew stronger in this generation. Female descendants of the Imbing line became keepers of oral traditions, song leaders during rituals, and community advocates. Their presence in leadership circles showed that the Subanen vision of harmony extended beyond gender. Leadership was about wisdom and responsibility, not about titles reserved only for men. In this way, the Imbing clan adapted to modern values while still holding tightly to ancient customs. Their efforts ensured that even as the internet spread into Lapuyan, the beat of the Bucklog drum could still be heard, calling people together in thanksgiving, prayer, and memory. Today, the Imbing clan stands as more than just a family line. It is a symbol of continuity. From the days of Gumabongabon to the era of smartphones, the Imbing name has remained woven into every stage of Subanen history. Modern descendants continue to walk in multiple worlds. They attend municipal meetings in formal attire, then return home to preside over rituals dressed in traditional garments. They post on social media to spread awareness of Subanen rights, then sit under the stars to retell stories first told by ancestors 1,000 nights ago. This ability to shift between worlds is not accidental. It is the inheritance of a family that has always served as a bridge, a reformer, and a bearer of culture. Perhaps the most powerful sign of their ongoing role is the respect they command in Bucklog ceremonies. Whenever a Bucklog is announced, Subanen from distant villages gather, and among the first names called to lead are members of the Imbing clan. Their voices in prayer, their presence in ritual, their authority in council, all signal continuity. Even in legal battles over ancestral domain, the clan stands at the forefront, advocating that the land of their people must remain theirs, not parceled off to companies or outsiders. As the 21st century deepens, challenges grow. Mining interests threaten mountains, deforestation endangers rivers, and migration drains youth from villages. Yet the Imbing name still inspires. It tells every Subanen child that they belong to a lineage unbroken, one that has faced outsiders for centuries and still stands. The modern descendants are not the end of the story, but its living continuation. For as long as their voices call out in councils and their feet stamp upon the Bucklog platform, the saga of the Imbing clan remains alive, whispering from the past, speaking in the present, and guiding the path toward the future. Throughout Subanen history, the most enduring picture of the Imbing clan is that of a bridge that spans across generations, across beliefs, and across the great divide between tradition and modernity. When the Spaniards came with their cross, the Imbing line did not simply bow their heads. They weighed carefully what must be accepted and what must be resisted. When the Americans arrived with schools and law, they did not abandon their old Gookum courts. They blended the two, making sure that justice could still be spoken in Subanen terms. This bridging role was not about compromise and weakness, but about survival with dignity. It allowed the Subanen to walk in two worlds without losing themselves in either. For instance, when a young member of the clan attends a municipal meeting today, their surname opens doors in the political arena. Yet the same person, when sitting beneath the starlit sky of Lapuyan, can chant ancient prayers with the authority of their ancestors. That duality is possible because the family has become the living connection, the rope bridge stretched over centuries of change. It is said in local stories that to cross a river safely, one must hold on tightly to the rope. The Imbing Clan became that rope for the Subanen people. Without them, perhaps the old rituals would have drowned in the flood of modernization, or the community might have been swept entirely into the currents of outsiders' politics. But because of their bridge-like presence, the Subanen could step forward, not as exiles in their own land, but as heirs carrying both ancient songs and modern responsibilities. While being a bridge was about connection, the Imbing clan also wore the image of a reformer. Reform was never easy, for it meant standing at the center of storms, demanding change from both sides. In the early 20th century, when Mangura Vicente accepted Catholic baptism, it was not simply an act of submission, but a reformist step. He carved space for the Subanen to be recognized by the new powers of the land. In council sessions, he and his descendants pushed for fair treatment of indigenous people, ensuring that the voice of the mountain was heard in the towns of the plains. Reform also meant reshaping Subanen society from within. Where there were old feuds, the Imbing clan promoted peace. Where there was mistrust of education, they encouraged learning. Where rituals risked being reduced to performances for outsiders, they emphasized meaning and sacredness. Every act was a reform, gently reshaping without breaking, introducing new practices while protecting what was irreplaceable. Modern descendants continue this reformist spirit. They fight for ancestral domain recognition in courts, reforming the legal view of indigenous rights. They speak at cultural forums, reforming the way outsiders perceive the Subanen, not as backward tribes, but as bearers of an ancient and vibrant civilization. They reform education by weaving traditional knowledge into formal schooling. Thus, the clan stands as reformers not only for their people, but also for the larger society that once tried to erase them. Above all, the Imbing clan is remembered as a culture bearer. If they were bridges and reformers, it was only because they first carried within them the fire of identity. Without that flame, there would be nothing to bridge, nothing to reform. In bucklog ceremonies, the presence of the Imbing is never casual. Their voices in prayer, their rhythm on the platform, their leadership in offerings, all mark them as custodians of something larger than themselves. To bear culture is no light burden. It means safeguarding stories that are centuries old, chants that can be forgotten in a single generation, and rituals that require precision to remain sacred. Imbing descendants have carried this burden with pride. Even as they learned to speak the languages of outsiders, Spanish, English, Cebuano, Tagalog, they never abandoned the tongue of the Subanen. Even as they took up government roles, they never ceased to preside over Gukum justice. Even as they embraced new religions, they never abandoned the ancestral reverence for the land and the spirits that dwell within it. In the modern world, being a culture bearer also means translation, not just of words, but of meaning. An Imbing elder explaining bucklog to a government officer is not merely describing a dance. They're translating a worldview where thanksgiving binds humans, ancestors, and spirits together. A young Imbing posting about Subanen culture on social media is not just uploading a video. They're carrying the flame into the digital age. Thus, the image of the clan as a culture bearer is perhaps the most powerful, for it ensures that the Subanen story is not just remembered, but lived. The first and perhaps most painful trial of modernity for the Subanen, and especially for the Imbing clan, has been the slow encroachment of mining companies into ancestral territories. For centuries, The hills and rivers of Samboanga Peninsula were not just physical spaces. They were living relatives, part of the Subanen family itself. The soil was the skin of the ancestors, the rivers were their veins, and the forests were their breath. To harm them was to harm the people. Yet, as the 20th century unfolded, large-scale mining projects backed by both private corporations and government policies began carving into these lands, pulling out gold, copper, and nickel. For many outsiders, these projects were symbols of progress. They promised jobs, roads, and the illusion of development. But for the Subanen, they were an invasion. The bucklog platforms trembled not from ritual dance, but from the blasting of mountainsides. Rivers that once flowed clear enough to drink from became stained with chemicals. Sacred sites where offerings had been made for generations disappeared under bulldozers. The Imbing Clan, because of their standing, found themselves at the forefront of this battle. Some descendants used their positions in local politics to resist mining applications. Others joined NGOs and environmental groups to amplify indigenous voices. Still others stood at the mining gates themselves, risking confrontation with armed guards. This resistance was not just about protecting land. It was about protecting memory. Without the hills, how could the stories of the ancestors be retold? Without the rivers, how could the rituals of cleansing be performed? Yet the challenge of mining revealed something deeper: the tension between survival and resistance. Some community members, facing poverty, accepted jobs in the very companies that destroyed their lands. Others took mining royalties as quick relief. For the Imbing Clan, this trial was not only external but internal. A test of unity, of whether the bridge, the reformer, and the culture bearer within them could hold against the crushing weight of modern greed. Another trial came not from machines but from movement. The migration of outsiders into Subanen territories and the forced displacement of Subanen families themselves. Government programs in the mid-20th century encouraged settlers from Visayas and Luzon to move into Mindanao, including Zamboanga. These settlers came with plows, papers of land ownership, and sometimes even armed protection. Slowly, the fertile valleys that once belonged to the Subanen became farmlands registered under new names. Displacement was not always violent, but it was always painful. A Subanen family might wake up to find that the land their ancestors farmed for centuries was now declared public domain, sold cheaply to a settler family, or seized for military purposes. Without titles, the Subanen were told they had no rights, even though their roots in the land went deeper than written law. This wound cut sharply into the identity of the people. For how can one sing of the mountains if one no longer lives among them? Migration also meant cultural pressure. Settler children laughed at Subanen children in schools, calling them backward or uncivilized. Churches preached against rituals, branding them as pagan. Over time, some Subanen families hid their practices to avoid shame, while others converted fully to outside ways. Yet here again, the Imbing Clan became a shield. By holding on to rituals publicly, by participating in both municipal governance and traditional bucklog, they modeled the possibility of survival without surrender. The strain of migration also forced adaptation. Many Imbing descendants moved to cities for education or work. They carried with them the weight of being outsiders in urban spaces, but also the responsibility of carrying their culture into places where it was invisible. In Manila or Cebu, an Imbing student was not just one among many. They were a representative of a people that most classmates had never even heard of. To survive this trial was to learn how to be both deeply rooted and constantly uprooted, both local and global at the same time. The third great trial came through the tangled web of modern politics. In the past, Subanen governance was guided by elders, by consensus in councils, by the justice of the Gukum, and by the sacred balance maintained in rituals. Modern politics, however, demanded elections, campaigns, and alliances with political parties that did not always serve indigenous interests. For the Imbing Clan, this was both opportunity and trap. Their name carried weight, and their leadership qualities made them natural candidates. Some members successfully entered municipal councils or even higher offices. From these positions, they were able to pass ordinances protecting culture, to secure funds for schools, and to push back against unjust land seizures. Their presence in politics gave the Subanen visibility and a seat at tables where decisions were made. But politics also brought corruption, division, and danger. Clan members sometimes found themselves targeted by rivals, pressured by political dynasties, or tempted by personal gain. To remain honest in a system built on compromise was itself a battlefield. Moreover, not all Subanen agreed on political strategies. Some wanted stronger alliances with national parties, while others feared assimilation. Some favored negotiating with mining companies for royalties, while others demanded total rejection. This crossroads of modern politics tested the very heart of the Imbing legacy. Could they reform without losing integrity? Could they bridge without being broken? Could they bear culture while navigating the dirty waters of elections? The answers were never simple. Yet, through victories and failures alike, the clan demonstrated that leadership meant not just winning power, but holding responsibility to ancestors, to community, and to the future yet unborn. If the land was the body of the Subanen people, then their stories and chants were the blood that flowed through generations. For centuries, the Subanen carried no written books, no carved monuments, no official archives. Instead, they wove their memory into an oral tapestry. Myths, epics, chants, and lullabies passed from elder to child, from ritual leader to apprentice, from ancestor to descendant. These oral traditions were not simply entertainment. They were living maps of how to survive, how to honor, and how to belong. The Imbing clan became one of the strongest guardians of this oral tapestry. Their homes often echoed with chants performed during bucklog or harvest celebrations. Elders within the clan, revered for their deep knowledge, could recite genealogies stretching back centuries. These recitations were not random lists of names, but were living proofs of continuity, evidence that the clan existed, that the land was theirs, and that the ancestors were still listening. In Subanen cosmology, words themselves were sacred. To speak a story was to invite the spirit of that story into the present moment. A chant about the creation of rivers was believed to refresh the waters. A story about the courage of warriors was believed to stir the blood of the listeners. And a lullaby sung to a child was believed to carry the blessings of ancestors into their dreams. This is why the Imbing clan's role as culture bearers was so important. If the chant ceased, the ancestors would fade, and with them the identity of the people. Elders of the clan often reminded the young that forgetting a story was more dangerous than losing a weapon. Weapons could be rebuilt, but stories, once gone, could never return in their original voice. Thus, preserving oral tradition became an act of both resistance and survival. Even in times of displacement and hardship, the clan carried their stories like sacred fire, ensuring that every generation would receive its warmth and light. Among the Subanen, the most sacred oral expressions were the chants performed during rituals. These chants were not casual songs. They were carefully structured invocations, memorized with precision, and performed in moments of deep communal importance. A wrong word, a misplaced tone, or a forgotten verse could disrupt the spiritual balance of the ritual. For this reason, ritual chanters were trained with intense discipline. often spending years as apprentices before being allowed to perform. Within the Imbing clan, certain individuals became renowned for their mastery of chants. During bucklog ceremonies, these chanters would stand at the center of the ritual platform, their voices carrying across the night air, calling upon spirits, ancestors, and guardians of the land. The chants told stories of origin, explained the meaning of symbols, and guided the community in maintaining harmony with the unseen world. The power of these chants was not only symbolic, but also deeply social. A chant could settle disputes by reminding participants of ancestral laws. It could heal divisions by recalling shared identity. It could strengthen the courage of warriors by connecting them to heroes of the past. The chanters of the Imbing clan became mediators, not just between humans and spirits, but also between community members themselves. In the modern age, recording devices and written text have captured some of these chants, but the true power remains in live performance. To hear a Subanen chant is to feel time fold, to sense the ancestors leaning close, to realize that words can still shape reality. For the Imbing clan, protecting these chants has been a sacred duty, one that continues despite pressures of modernization and the risk of cultural erosion. Every culture has its stage, a space where the sacred and the everyday intersect. For the Subanen, that stage is most vividly seen in the Bucklog platform, a massive wooden structure built during great communal celebrations. Here, chants, dances, and offerings are combined into a single act of communication with the spirit world. For the Imbing clan, hosting or leading a bucklog was both an honor and a responsibility, for the platform itself was believed to be a bridge between worlds. When the ritual began, the chanting would guide the community's spirit into alignment. Drums echoed like the heartbeat of the earth, while dancers' footsteps awakened the ancestors beneath the soil. The platform trembled not from fragility, but from power, a physical reminder that the human world was never separate from the spirit realm. To stand on the bucklog was to stand at the threshold of eternity. The Imbing clan's deep involvement in these rituals ensured that their leadership was never merely political or social, but also spiritual. A chief of the clan was expected not just to mediate disputes or manage resources, but also to embody the sacred link between people and spirits. Their authority came as much from ritual performance as from political decisions. This blending of the sacred and the practical gave the clan a unique resilience. Even when political power shifted, their spiritual role remained unshaken. In modern times, the bucklog has faced many challenges. Governments see it as an event requiring permits. Outsiders view it as a spectacle. Yet for the Subanen, and especially the Imbing, it remains the beating heart of identity. Each chant sung, each step danced, each offering made is a reminder that survival is not only about land or politics, but about maintaining the conversation with the ancestors. Migration has always been a part of human history, but for the Subanen people, and especially for the Imbing clan, leaving the ancestral mountains of Samboanga was not simply a matter of geography. It was a shift in spirit, a wound in memory, a test of identity. The clan had lived for centuries among the rivers, forests, and hills that shaped their way of life. The land was their teacher, their protector, and their sacred partner. To be displaced from it was to risk forgetting who they were. The pressures of displacement were many. Some were caused by natural hardships, poor harvests, environmental changes, and the difficulty of sustaining large families on small parcels of land. Others came from political and social forces, government projects that claimed Subanen territories, logging companies that stripped forest bare, and settlers from outside who pushed deeper into indigenous areas. In each case, the Imbing clan found itself forced to make difficult choices, stay and fight, or leave and adapt. For many, leaving was a matter of survival. Some traveled to lowland towns in search of trade and employment. Others moved to coastal cities, hoping to find work as fishermen, laborers, or traders. A few even crossed the waters to distant islands, bringing with them only fragments of their traditions, a remembered chant, a talisman from an elder, or a story whispered at night. The diaspora of the clan was not a single event, but a gradual scattering, generation by generation, wave after wave. Yet, even in movement, the Imbing Clan carried their identity like a hidden fire. They built new homes, but inside those homes were small altars honoring the spirits. They worked in fields or factories, but when a child was born, a Subanen chant was still whispered. In this way, the clan learned to transform exile into continuity, turning displacement into a wider circle of belonging. Their journey was not about losing themselves, but about discovering how to remain whole even in foreign soil. Once scattered into new territories, the Imbing clan faced the challenge of survival without the familiar embrace of ancestral mountains. In towns and cities, they were often outsiders, their language mocked, their traditions misunderstood, their way of life treated as backward. Many families of the diaspora found themselves caught between two worlds, pressure to adopt the customs of lowland society, yet longing to preserve the sacred patterns of Subanen life. The key to survival became community building. Wherever a few Subanen families settled, they sought each other out, creating small circles of kinship that functioned as miniature villages. These circles became safe spaces where elders could pass down stories, children could learn their heritage, and rituals could be performed even in cramped urban settings. A bucklog platform might not be possible in the heart of crowded town, but the spirit of bucklog, the gathering, the chanting, the offerings, could be reimagined in smaller, symbolic forms. The Imbing clan members often became leaders in these diaspora communities. Their long history of guiding rituals and preserving oral traditions gave them authority and respect among fellow Subanen. In towns where discrimination was strong, clan leaders reminded their people that shame was a weapon of outsiders, not a truth of identity. They encouraged pride, teaching the younger generation that to be Subanen was not a weakness, but a legacy of resilience. Over time, the diaspora communities began to organize. They formed associations, held cultural nights, and lobbied for recognition of indigenous rights even far from the ancestral mountains. For the Imbing clan, this leadership extended their influence beyond their homeland, making them not just guardians of tradition, but also builders of bridges between worlds. The diaspora, once seen as a tragedy, gradually became a network of resilience, spreading Subanen identity across wider horizons. As decades passed, the Imbing clan's diaspora reached even further. Younger generations grew up in cities where the native tongue was no longer dominant, where Subanen chants sounded foreign, and where traditional rituals competed with modern entertainment. Yet in moments of crisis, joy, or reflection, the pull of memory always returned. It was in weddings where a chant was revived, in funerals where ancestral prayers were whispered, in reunions where stories of the homeland were retold. The clan discovered that identity is not bound only to geography. Though the mountains and rivers of Sambawanga remained the sacred heart, the spirit of Subanen life could live in any place where memory was honored. A family living in Manila could still mark harvest time with offerings, even if their field was only a small garden. A migrant worker abroad could still carry a piece of Imbing heritage by teaching their children a lullaby from the hills. In this way, the diaspora transformed into a global identity, one that was not limited to territory, but rooted in memory and practice. Technology added a new layer to this survival. Clan members recorded chants on mobile phones, shared stories on social media, and organized online gatherings to reconnect across distances. What was once transmitted only through oral tradition in mountain villages was now being preserved in digital archives. Though this transformation came with risks of simplification and dilution, it also ensured that the voices of the ancestors would not fall silent. For the Imbing clan, diaspora became a paradox, both a wound and a gift. The wound was the loss of the homeland's daily embrace. The gift was the chance to spread identity wider, ensuring that the Subanen story was not confined to one place, but carried into many corners of the world. In this, the clan's journey mirrors that of countless indigenous peoples. Survival not by erasing tradition, but by adapting it, carrying it, and reimagining it wherever life takes them. Long before the Imbing clan rose to prominence, the Subanen people of Zamboanga faced their first major encounters with foreign colonizers, the Spaniards. Unlike lowland Filipinos who were largely brought under colonial control through settlements and the establishment of churches, the Subanen lived in rugged highlands and dense forests, giving them both the advantage of isolation and the challenge of survival under harsh conditions. The Spanish expeditions often sought gold, land, and converts, but the Subanen had already established a way of life that was self-sufficient, deeply spiritual, and tightly knit around ancestral leadership. Initial contact was marked by suspicion and sporadic conflict. Spanish soldiers and missionaries penetrated river valleys with ambitions of controlling trade routes and imposing Christianity. They built forts in lowland areas and sent emissaries into Subanen territory, but these efforts were largely met with resistance. The Subanen understood the value of their autonomy, and leaders like those in the Imbing ancestral line, though not yet formally recognized as chiefs in colonialized, organized communities to resist intrusion. Oral histories recall ambushes on Spanish patrols, strategic withdrawal to forests during raids, and the careful preservation of ritual sites hidden from outsiders. The Imbing ancestors who lived during this period were custodians of more than just people. They were custodians of memory and land. Every hilltop, river bend, and sacred grove was considered sacred. Allowing colonizers to occupy these spaces without negotiation would have been tantamount to surrendering the soul of the community. The Subanen's tactics were not purely military, but also psychological and cultural. They resisted through misinformation, alliances with neighboring tribes, and the use of rituals that reinforced group identity and courage. This resistance ensured that by the time the Spanish withdrew from Mindanao's interior to consolidate power in lowland settlements, the Subanen remained largely autonomous, retaining their ancestral laws, rituals, and way of life. By the turn of the 20th century, the Spaniards had been replaced by American colonial administration, bringing with them new systems of governance, education, and religion. Unlike the Spanish, who had tried to dominate through force and conversion, the Americans attempted a combination of political restructuring and social development. For the Subanen, this period represented both opportunity and challenge. The American authorities sought a single leader who could represent the tribe in official matters, effectively creating what was known as the tribal ward system. It was in this context that Timuay Imbing emerged. Recognized by his own people for wisdom, fairness, and the ability to maintain peace, Imbing was appointed as the head of the tribal ward of Lapuyan. This position required negotiation with American officials, oversight of local governance, and mediation between Subanen communities and the demands of colonial administrators. While some chiefs in other regions resisted, fearing that participation would undermine autonomy, Imbing saw an opportunity to safeguard the interests of his people. He became a bridge, literally and symbolically, between the Subanen world and the encroaching structures of colonial governance. This was no easy task. The Americans introduced taxes, formal land surveys, and a legal framework alien to the Subanen. Some community members feared loss of autonomy. Others saw it as a chance for stability and recognition. Timuay Imbing navigated these tensions carefully, ensuring that Gukum, the customary system of justice, continued to function while simultaneously cooperating with the colonial authorities. By doing so, he prevented the rapid erosion of Subanen identity while securing benefits such as schools, legal recognition, and relative peace in the community. His leadership during this period exemplifies the delicate balance required when indigenous peoples confront powerful outside forces. One of the most critical dimensions of American intrusion was the introduction of Christian missionaries, particularly from Protestant groups like the Christian and Missionary Alliance, CNMA. Unlike the Spanish friars, these missionaries approached the Subanen with an emphasis on schooling and conversion, hoping to integrate the tribe into a new moral and educational framework. Again, Timuay Imbing's approach was pragmatic and culturally sensitive. Instead of outright rejection or passive acceptance, he provided land for the missionaries, allowed them to establish schools, and facilitated their work, but always without abandoning Subanen rituals or beliefs. Through this dual approach, Lapuyan became the birthplace of Protestant Christianity among the Subanen, yet simultaneously retained its sacred traditions. The bucklog continued to be performed, stories of ancestors were recited, and rituals that connected the people to rivers, mountains, and forests were maintained. Imbing's strategy was clear. Religion could be adopted, but culture could not be surrendered. By creating a space where the Subanen could engage with modern education and faith without losing ancestral identity, he set a precedent for subsequent generations. The Imbing approach to colonial interaction was therefore multifaceted. Resist when necessary, negotiate when possible, and always prioritize the continuity of culture. The lessons of these encounters remain relevant today. Modern descendants face pressures from corporations, political systems, and globalization, but the example set by ancestors like Timuay Imbing, balancing cooperation with preservation, continues to guide their strategy. It underscores a recurring theme in Subanen history. Survival is never passive. It is active, deliberate, and grounded in the courage to navigate changing worlds without losing oneself. The story of the Imbing Clan is, at its heart, a story of leadership. Not leadership defined by titles, force, or wealth, but by wisdom, fairness, and service. From the earliest known chiefs like Gumabongabon and his son Dajending, leadership was a responsibility rather than a privilege. These early leaders understood that authority could not be imposed. It had to be earned through justice, guidance, and protection of both people and land. The principles established by the earliest Imbing leaders became embedded in the culture of the clan. First, a leader must be just. This meant not favoring relatives or powerful families, but listening carefully to disputes, weighing evidence impartially, and ensuring that decisions reflected both law and morality. Second, a leader must be wise, possessing not only knowledge of the natural and social world, but also spiritual insight. The Subanen believed that mismanagement could invite misfortune, not just for a leader, but for the entire community. Leaders were expected to read the signs of the land, interpret dreams, and act in accordance with the guidance of the ancestors. Third, a leader must be a keeper of harmony, mediating between families, clans, and neighboring communities. Discord could weaken the community, leaving it vulnerable to external threats or internal collapse. These principles were not theoretical. They were practiced daily. Leaders engaged in council meetings, resolved conflicts, presided over rituals, and ensured that every household had access to justice. The oral memory of the Subanen preserved these stories not as mere anecdotes, but as examples to guide future generations. For the Imbing Clan, leadership was inseparable from culture. To lead without understanding rituals, history, and social cohesion was considered incomplete and dangerous. The principle of leadership was most visibly tested and exemplified in Timuay Imbing, who emerged in the late 1800s during the arrival of American officials and Protestant missionaries. His leadership was multifaceted and revolutionary in its synthesis of tradition and adaptation. Unlike predecessors who dealt solely with internal tribal matters, Imbing faced the challenge of integrating external influences while preserving Subanen identity. Imbing's leadership embodied the concept of balance. He preserved the gukum, ensuring that disputes continued to be resolved according to ancestral law, while simultaneously negotiating with American officials who sought to implement colonial legal structures. He welcomed missionaries, providing land and support, not because he abandoned tradition, but because he recognized the strategic advantage of education and religious influence in ensuring his people's survival in a changing world. He led bucklog ceremonies alongside schooling initiatives, reminding the Subanen that their rituals and identity were not obstacles to modernity, but anchors that kept the community rooted. By modeling this dual approach, he demonstrated that leadership was not merely about directing action, but about shaping values, attitudes, and long-term resilience. Through his example, the Imbing Clan established a blueprint for generations to follow. Leadership must integrate wisdom, cultural preservation, and pragmatic engagement with the external world. Imbing's success as a leader also relied heavily on listening, to elders, to children, to outsiders, and to the land itself. In this way, he was not a dictator, but a mediator, ensuring that decisions reflected collective well-being rather than personal ambition. His ability to maintain peace internally while opening windows to the wider world cemented his reputation as a bridge between eras, societies, and spiritual realms. Following Timuay Imbing, leadership passed to his son, Datu Lumok Imbing, and later to his grandchild, Mangura Vicente L. Imbing. Each of these leaders interpreted the ancestral principles of leadership in ways suitable to their times. Lumok was a reformer, encouraging permanent settlement, agricultural innovation, and education. He reinforced the community's economic and social stability while safeguarding ritual practice. For instance, he introduced coconut planting as a reliable livelihood, but insisted that festivals, rites, and stories continued to bind the people to their heritage. Mangura Vicente, in turn, became the culture bearer. He inherited not just the title, but the responsibility of preserving the spiritual and ritualistic heart of the Subanen. In a period of rapid modernization, he championed ancestral domain rights, defended the bucklog against dilution, and ensured that oral traditions continued to flourish. Under his leadership, the clan negotiated the tension between adaptation to modern society and fidelity to ancestral laws, demonstrating that true leadership is both protective and visionary. These successive generations illustrate a pattern. The Imbing lineage did not rely solely on charisma or inheritance. Leadership was cultivated through careful observation, rigorous practice of cultural duties, and the ability to mediate between the past and the present. The clan story shows that effective leadership is multidimensional, blending justice, cultural knowledge, adaptability, and moral authority. Even today, modern Imbing descendants who take leadership roles, whether in ritual, politics, or education, trace their authority back to this carefully nurtured lineage of principles. The ritual emphasizes reciprocity. Humans offer gratitude and respect to spirits and ancestors, who in turn ensure prosperity, fertility, and protection. Thus, the bucklog is both a spiritual dialogue and a social contract, reinforcing identity, unity, and continuity. While the bucklog's spiritual function is paramount, it also serves as a medium of cultural transmission. Stories, histories, and moral lessons are embedded within the songs, chants, and dances. Elders use the ritual as an opportunity to teach younger generations about genealogy, heroic deeds, environmental stewardship, and the ethical codes of the Subanen people. Every performance is thus simultaneously a spiritual offering and a living classroom. For the Imbing Clan, this responsibility has always been central. From Timuay, Imbing to Mangura Vicente, they understood that their authority rested on their ability to transmit knowledge accurately. Mistakes or omissions could erode the community's understanding of its history and ethics. Consequently, meticulous attention is paid to every detail. The order of chants, the timing of drum beats, the sequence of dances, and the placement of offerings. Apprentices often train for years, learning each song and movement by heart before being permitted to perform publicly. For the Subanen people, the concept of ancestral land transcends property rights or economic utility. It is a spiritual, cultural, and social foundation. The forests, rivers, mountains, and valleys of Lapuyan are not merely spaces for cultivation or settlement. They're living partners in the survival and identity of the community. Every tree, stream, and rock carries stories of ancestors, lessons of survival, and symbols of the cosmic balance. To lose land is not merely a material loss, but a fracture in the chain of memory and spiritual continuity. The Imbing Clan, as long-standing custodians of the land, played a critical role in maintaining this balance. They organized communal efforts to manage forests sustainably, delineated sacred groves, and supervised agricultural practices that did not harm ecosystems. Their leadership ensured that hunting, gathering, and farming were conducted in ways that honored ancestral guidance and natural rhythms. Land stewardship was considered a sacred duty. Overexploitation risked not only environmental collapse, but spiritual consequences. Ancestral land also served as a seat of governance and ritual life. Bucklog platforms were constructed from trees sourced respectfully from surrounding forests. Sacred rivers were used in ceremonial rites, and upland terraces became classrooms where children learned both agriculture and history. The land itself was thus a teacher, offering lessons in resource management, ethics, and communal responsibility. Leaders of the Imbing Clan ensured that all activities on the land were governed by customary laws, gukum, maintaining fairness and ecological balance. Beyond spiritual and practical significance, ancestral land provided security and self-sufficiency. Families could cultivate crops, gather forest products, and build shelters without relying solely on external markets or governments. In times of external intrusion or colonial pressures, the land became both refuge and assertion of autonomy. The Imbing Clan's stewardship ensured that generations of Subanen could live in harmony with nature, preserving ecological integrity while maintaining cultural identity. Despite centuries of careful stewardship, the Subanen people have faced mounting challenges in protecting their ancestral lands. Colonization, logging, mining, and later national development projects often ignore traditional land claims, threatening both livelihood and cultural heritage. Large-scale deforestation disrupted ecosystems, eroded soil, and compromised water sources, while corporate encroachment undermined the authority of customary law. In response, the Imbing Clan emphasized legal and diplomatic strategies to safeguard land. Leaders engaged with government agencies, submitted claims for ancestral domain recognition, and advocated for policies that respect both ecological sustainability and indigenous rights. This dual approach combined the spiritual authority of clan leadership with modern legal tools, creating a layered defense against external exploitation. Environmental stewardship was further complicated by climate change and population pressures. Erratic rainfall, increased flooding, and soil degradation threatened traditional agriculture. The Imbing Clan encouraged adaptive practices, crop rotation, reforestation, terracing, and the careful management of forest resources. They also promoted education, teaching younger generations about conservation science alongside traditional ecological knowledge. By blending ancestral wisdom with contemporary understanding, the clan preserved both the health of the land and the continuity of cultural practices. The Imbing Clan's leadership in these challenges reflects a broader principle. Land is inseparable from identity, ritual, and survival. Protecting the environment is not simply a material necessity, but a moral and spiritual obligation. Every initiative to plant trees, restore rivers, or safeguard sacred sites is simultaneously an act of ecological stewardship and cultural preservation that in the latter half of the 20th century, the Subanen actively participated in the ancestral domain movement, seeking formal recognition of their rights to traditional lands. This movement coincided with national legislation and indigenous rights initiatives, allowing communities to secure titles, defend territories, and establish governance structures aligned with ancestral law. The Imbing Clan was central to this process, serving as negotiators, documentarians, and advocates. Their leadership ensured that land management continued to be guided by customary principles even under formal legal frameworks. Boundaries were mapped carefully to include sacred forests, hunting grounds, and river systems. Community councils were established to oversee resource use, resolve disputes, and maintain rituals tied to specific sites. Through these mechanisms, ancestral lands became both legally protected and culturally vibrant, integrating governance, spirituality, and environmental management. The clan also facilitated intergenerational education on land stewardship. Young Subanen were trained in ecological monitoring, ritual practice, and community leadership, ensuring that they would inherit not just property, but a comprehensive understanding of their responsibilities. Diaspora communities remained engaged, supporting local initiatives through funding, advocacy, and knowledge sharing. Ultimately, the Imbing Clan's work demonstrates that land preservation is inseparable from cultural survival. Protecting ancestral lands safeguards food security, spiritual practice, communal cohesion, and identity. Through proactive stewardship, advocacy, and education, the Subanen continue to maintain a deep, living relationship with their environment, ensuring that the mountains, rivers, and forests of Lapuyan remain both home and heritage for generations to come. The health and well-being of the Subanen people have historically been inseparable from their environment and spiritual beliefs. Unlike modern medicine, which often isolates biological causes from social and spiritual contexts, Subanen healing practices are holistic, encompassing physical, psychological, and spiritual dimensions. Healing is a communal affair, informed by generations of empirical observation, ritual knowledge, and oral transmission. Central to this system is the role of the Babalan or ritual healer, who functions as a physician, counselor, spiritual mediator, and custodian of herbal knowledge. The Imbing Clan, particularly in earlier generations, maintained a lineage of individuals skilled in these arts. They understood the medicinal properties of local plants, the timing of treatments according to natural cycles, and the spiritual significance of illness. Diseases were rarely seen as random. They were interpreted as imbalances in the relationship between humans, spirits, and nature. Healing, therefore, involved not only physical remedies, but rituals to restore harmony with ancestors and environmental forces. Herbal medicine was the cornerstone of Subanen healthcare. Leaves, roots, barks, and fruits were collected according to strict seasonal and ethical guidelines. Certain plants were reserved for specific ailments, while others were combined to enhance efficacy. Knowledge of dosage, preparation, and administration was passed down orally, often from elder healer to apprentice over years of observation and practice. Beyond individual remedies, communal rituals such as cleansing ceremonies, prayers, and offerings were integrated into the treatment process. The Imbing Clan also emphasized preventive care, teaching families about proper nutrition, hygiene, and moderation in daily activities. These practices were intertwined with spiritual guidance, reinforcing the belief that health is both a physical and moral responsibility. Children learned from elders about edible plants, safe water sources, and the importance of maintaining respect for the land and its spirits. In this way, the Subanen cultivated resilience against illness, guided by a sophisticated system that combined science, spirituality, and social cohesion. Rituals played a central role in Subanen healing, reflecting the interconnectedness of the physical and spiritual realms. The bucklog and other smaller ceremonies often included offerings, chants, and dances designed to appease spirits, restore balance, and promote health within the community. While the bucklog is primarily a Thanksgiving ritual, elements of healing were sometimes incorporated, especially during times of epidemic or widespread distress. The Imbing Clan oversaw these healing rituals, ensuring that each step was executed with precision. Rituals began with consultations where healers and elders assessed the patient's condition, both physically and spiritually. They considered factors such as the alignment of spirits, environmental influences, and social tensions that might affect health. Treatments were then administered, combining herbal remedies, incantations, and community participation. Families and neighbors often assisted, reflecting the communal nature of wellness. Healing ceremonies also reinforced social cohesion. By participating, community members reaffirmed shared values, observed ethical principles, and strengthened bonds of mutual support. The Imbing Clan's role was pivotal. They ensured that treatments were fair, knowledge was correctly transmitted, and that the spiritual dimensions of healing were respected. This integration of medicine, ritual, and social ethics underscores the holistic philosophy of Subanen healthcare, where well-being is as much a matter of community and culture as it is of individual biology. Furthermore, the Imbing Clan used these occasions to educate younger generations about the principles behind each remedy and ritual. Apprentices learned to identify plants, understand the spiritual rationale for specific actions, and observe ethical guidelines for treatment. The process was deliberate, combining practical skill, ethical training, and spiritual insight, producing healers who were knowledgeable, compassionate, and culturally grounded. The advent of modern medicine and government health initiatives presented both opportunities and challenges for Subanen healing practices. Clinics, hospitals, and pharmaceutical remedies introduced new options for care, but they also risked displacing indigenous knowledge. The Imbing Clan approached this challenge strategically, advocating integration rather than replacement. They encouraged the use of modern medicine for cases requiring surgical intervention, vaccinations, or disease prevention, while preserving traditional healing for chronic conditions, spiritual afflictions, and community health practices. This complementary approach respected both scientific innovation and ancestral wisdom. In addition, the clan facilitated documentation of herbal knowledge, ensuring that treatments were not lost even as younger generations engaged with formal education and modern healthcare systems. The Imbing leadership also promoted community workshops, where elders demonstrated remedies and rituals while explaining their purpose in both practical and spiritual terms. This educational strategy ensured that Subanen healing practices remained living, functional, and respected, even as external health systems expanded. They also encouraged research partnerships, allowing traditional knowledge to be studied scientifically without compromising sacred aspects of ritual. Ultimately, the Subanen approach to health, medicine, and healing illustrates the enduring principle of balance central to the Imbing legacy. It integrates spiritual and material, tradition and innovation, individual well-being, and communal care. By preserving these practices, the Imbing clan ensures that the Subanen people maintain not only physical health, but also the cultural vitality and spiritual resilience that define their identity. Health, in the Subanen worldview, is inseparable from heritage, community, and harmony with the natural world, a philosophy the Imbing clan continues to uphold in every generation. The Subanen people have a rich tradition of governance rooted in customary law, communal responsibility, and consensus building. Leadership was not simply a matter of inheritance or authority. It was a role defined by wisdom, fairness, and the ability to mediate conflicts. The Imbing clan, with its long line of leaders such as Timuay Imbing and Datu Lumok Imbing, embodied these principles, serving as both spiritual and administrative guides. The Gukum, or customary law, formed the backbone of Subanen governance. This body of rules covered conflict resolution, resource allocation, family and marriage relations, and ritual obligations. Unlike codified modern law, the Gukum was dynamic and orally transmitted, interpreted contextually by experienced leaders. The Imbing leaders ensured that it remained consistent with ancestral principles, adapting only as necessary to reflect new circumstances. Decisions were often reached through council meetings, where elders, clan representatives, and affected parties debated and sought consensus. This process emphasized dialogue, negotiation, and mutual respect, reinforcing communal cohesion while maintaining justice. Leadership in Subanen society involved multiple responsibilities. A chief like Timuay Imbing was expected to safeguard ancestral lands, preside over rituals, mediate disputes, and maintain relationships with neighboring groups and outside authorities. Governance was not about coercion, but guidance, rooted in the understanding that the leader's authority depended on trust, legitimacy, and cultural knowledge. By fostering fairness and adherence to custom, the Imbing clan cultivated a resilient system capable of sustaining the community across generations. Conflict resolution was a central aspect of Subanen governance. Disputes could arise from family matters, resource use, territorial boundaries, or violations of spiritual protocols. The Imbing clan played a critical role as mediators and adjudicators, using their deep knowledge of the Gukum to ensure fair outcomes. Their authority derived not from coercion, but from cultural legitimacy, moral integrity, and mastery of ritual knowledge. The process of adjudication was careful and inclusive. Leaders convened councils with representatives from all involved families or clans. Evidence, witnesses, and oral histories were considered, and decisions aimed not only to punish wrongdoing, but to restore social balance and communal harmony. Compensation, ritual cleansing, or communal labor could be part of resolutions, reinforcing both accountability and cohesion. Rituals often accompanied legal processes, particularly in cases involving sacred lands, spiritual obligations, or serious moral transgressions. These ceremonies underscored the idea that justice was holistic, encompassing the material, social, and spiritual dimensions of life. By integrating ritual and law, the Imbing clan maintained both the legitimacy of their rulings and the spiritual health of the community. Moreover, the clan ensured that justice was accessible and educative. Children and youth observed proceedings, learning ethical standards, dispute resolution techniques, and the importance of fairness. This embedded a culture of lawfulness, teaching that leadership and obedience are reciprocal. The people trust leaders who are just, and leaders gain authority through the community's respect and adherence to custom. The arrival of colonial administrations, municipal structures, and national governance frameworks introduced challenges and opportunities for Subanen legal systems. Leaders of the Imbing clan navigated this duality by bridging traditional and formal governance, ensuring that the principles of the Gukum remained relevant while engaging effectively with external authorities. Timuay Imbing, Datu Lumok, and later Mangura Vicente worked to represent Subanen interests in municipal councils and legal institutions. They negotiated land rights, ensured fair representation, and protected the community from external exploitation. Their strategy was based on adaptation without compromise. Modern governance structures could coexist with customary law if guided by cultural principles and community consultation. Today, Subanen communities continue to practice this integrated governance. Ancestral councils resolve local disputes, oversee ritual obligations, and manage communal resources, while elected officials and formal institutions handle administrative, developmental, and legal matters in alignment with state law. The Imbing clan continues to act as mediators, advisors, and cultural custodians, ensuring that governance remains rooted in ethics, tradition, and community well-being. This fusion of customary and modern systems highlights a core principle of the Imbing legacy. Leadership and justice are most effective when they respect both the wisdom of the past and the realities of the present. By preserving these practices, the Subanen people maintain not only order, but identity, demonstrating that governance, law, and justice are as much about culture as they are about administration. Festivals in Subanen society are more than celebrations. They are living expressions of identity, history, and spirituality. Among the most significant is the Bucklog, which serves as both a Thanksgiving ritual and a communal event reinforcing social cohesion. Festivals mark seasonal cycles, agricultural milestones, and spiritual observances, integrating human activity with the rhythms of nature. The Imbing clan has historically played a central role in organizing and overseeing these festivals, ensuring that they adhere to ancestral protocols while reflecting contemporary realities. The preparation for a festival is extensive, involving the construction of platforms, preparation of offerings, rehearsals for dances and chants, and coordination among families and subgroups. This process fosters cooperation, instills discipline, and reinforces a sense of collective responsibility. Every member of the community, from elders to children, has a role, creating an immersive educational experience where ritual knowledge, ethical values, and cultural narratives are transmitted organically. Leadership during festivals is both ceremonial and managerial. The Imbing clan oversees the proper execution of rituals, ensuring that offerings are made correctly, chants and dances are performed accurately, and participants understand their roles. By mediating conflicts, guiding preparation, and safeguarding spiritual integrity, they maintain the ritual and social coherence of the festival. Festivals also serve as public affirmations of land stewardship, social hierarchy, and ancestral respect, reinforcing the interconnectedness of spirituality, ecology, and governance. Through festivals, the Subanen articulate a worldview in which community, tradition, and the natural environment are inseparable. Participation embeds values of cooperation, reciprocity, and respect, ensuring that the next generation internalizes both the cultural and ethical frameworks essential for sustaining the community. The Imbing Clan's enduring leadership ensures that these festivals remain living, evolving, and culturally authentic, reflecting centuries of accumulated wisdom while embracing contemporary needs. Subanen arts, encompassing music, dance, carving, weaving, and oral storytelling, serve as both entertainment and repositories of cultural knowledge. Music and dance, particularly those performed during festivals, encode genealogical histories, moral lessons, and spiritual teachings. Every beat, gesture, and vocal intonation carries meaning, requiring careful instruction and interpretation. The Imbing Clan has historically acted as custodians of these artistic forms, ensuring fidelity to ancestral techniques and symbolism. Carving and weaving also serve as cultural texts. Platforms used for the bucklog, ceremonial objects, and woven textiles are imbued with patterns and motifs representing ancestral stories, spiritual beliefs, and social hierarchies. Artisans within the Subanen community, often under the guidance of the Imbing Clan, produce works that simultaneously serve functional, aesthetic, and didactic purposes. These artifacts are not merely decorative. They mediate cultural memory, transmitting identity, history, and ethics across generations. Oral storytelling complements these arts, providing context, explanation, and reinforcement. Legends, genealogies, and moral narratives are recited during festivals, communal gatherings, and daily life, maintaining an unbroken chain of cultural knowledge. The Imbing Clan ensures that storytelling is structured, accurate, and ethically instructive, preserving linguistic nuances, historical accuracy, and ritual protocols. This combination of arts, performance, and oral transmission creates a holistic system of cultural preservation, where aesthetics, memory, and ethics converge. Arts also provide a platform for adaptation and innovation. While rooted in tradition, Subanen artists under the guidance of the Imbing Clan explore new forms and materials, ensuring that cultural expression remains dynamic. This ability to balance continuity and creativity allows the culture to thrive in modern contexts without losing its essence, demonstrating that art is not static, but a living dialogue between past and present. In the modern era, Subanen festivals and arts face both opportunities and challenges. Globalization, migration, and modern entertainment options have introduced competing influences, sometimes eroding interest in traditional practices. However, the Imbing Clan has been proactive in maintaining relevance and ensuring continuity. Community schools, cultural centers, and heritage programs now incorporate festival preparation, traditional arts, and oral storytelling into their curricula, allowing youth to engage with culture in meaningful ways. Digital technology and media also offer new platforms for preservation and promotion. Videos, recordings, and social media help document rituals, performances, and crafts, making them accessible to diaspora communities and younger generations who may be geographically distant. Yet the Imbing Clan emphasizes that authentic participation, rather than passive observation, remains essential. Experiencing festivals firsthand, performing dances, and engaging in storytelling ensures that knowledge is embodied, internalized, and transmitted effectively. Festivals and arts also serve as points of cultural diplomacy. Subanen communities showcase their rituals at regional and national events, sharing heritage with other indigenous groups, scholars, and policymakers. Through these presentations, The Imbing Clan ensures that the community's identity is recognized, respected, and integrated into broader dialogues about culture, heritage, and indigenous rights. Ultimately, festivals and arts are living symbols of Subanen resilience, creativity, and identity. They encapsulate the principles of cooperation, spiritual mindfulness, and historical awareness central to the Imbing lineage. By guiding the community in these practices, the Imbing Clan ensures that Subanen cultural expression continues to thrive, educating new generations, reinforcing communal bonds, and celebrating the intricate tapestry of their ancestral heritage. The 21st century presents unique challenges and opportunities for the Subanen people, particularly in maintaining cultural integrity amid rapid globalization, urbanization, and technological change. The Imbing Clan remains a central pillar in this ongoing journey, bridging the wisdom of the past with the practical demands of the present. Leadership today is not merely ceremonial. It is a dynamic responsibility encompassing advocacy, cultural preservation, education, and environmental stewardship. Modern Imbing leaders continue the legacy established by Timuay Imbing, Datu Lumok, and Mangura Vicente, acting as mediators between their communities and external authorities, including local government units, national agencies, and NGOs. They oversee ancestral domain initiatives, ensuring that legal protections for Subanen lands are respected and enforced. Their guidance extends beyond land management, encompassing health, education, and community development projects, illustrating a holistic approach to leadership that integrates social welfare with cultural preservation. Cultural custodianship remains a defining role of the Imbing Clan. Leaders actively promote the bucklog and other rituals, ensuring that new generations experience firsthand the richness of their heritage. They organize workshops, mentorship programs, and community gatherings, teaching young Subanen about oral traditions, rituals, arts, and ethical principles embedded in their history. This approach ensures that cultural knowledge is actively transmitted rather than passively remembered, reinforcing identity, community cohesion, and resilience in the face of societal change. The clan's leadership is also adaptive. They embrace technological tools such as digital archives, social media, and audiovisual documentation to preserve and share knowledge, ensuring that even as physical proximity diminishes, cultural memory remains vibrant. By combining ancient practices with contemporary methodologies, the Imbing Clan illustrates that tradition and innovation are not opposites, but complementary forces, capable of sustaining community identity across generations. Education continues to be a cornerstone of the Imbing legacy. Clan leaders advocate for schooling that respects both modern curricula and traditional knowledge, creating a dual approach that equips youth to navigate contemporary society while remaining grounded in Subanen heritage. Formal schooling in literacy, science, and governance is complemented by instruction in oral history, traditional law, gukum, medicinal knowledge, and ritual practices. This comprehensive model produces leaders who are culturally literate, ethically grounded, and socially responsible, capable of defending the rights and identity of the Subanen community in diverse contexts. Global engagement has become an essential dimension of the clan's work. Imbing leaders participate in conferences, collaborate with universities, and engage with organizations focused on indigenous rights, cultural preservation, and environmental sustainability. By doing so, they ensure that Subanen perspectives are represented in policy discussions, academic research, and advocacy initiatives. The clan's efforts also foster networks that provide resources, knowledge, and support, strengthening the community's ability to face global challenges without sacrificing cultural integrity. Moreover, the Imbing Clan emphasizes intergenerational mentorship, pairing elders with youth to transmit practical skills, ethical guidance, and spiritual understanding. This mentorship reinforces social cohesion and ensures that leadership is a continuous, lived process rather than a static title. Through these efforts, the Subanen are able to navigate complex modern realities while maintaining the core values that have sustained them for centuries: respect for nature, ethical responsibility, and communal solidarity. The Imbing legacy is ultimately defined by balance and foresight. Past leaders acted as bridges between tradition and change, ensuring that the Subanen could adapt without losing their identity. Today's Imbing leaders continue this work, addressing contemporary issues such as environmental degradation, economic pressures, and cultural dilution, while remaining faithful to ancestral wisdom. Their efforts demonstrate that true leadership is not about personal gain, but communal welfare, ethical integrity, and cultural continuity. Environmental stewardship remains a key priority. The clan organizes reforestation projects, sustainable farming initiatives, and campaigns to protect rivers, forests, and sacred sites. These activities are integrated with ritual practices, reinforcing the notion that land, culture, and spirituality are inseparable. Similarly, advocacy for ancestral domain rights ensures that communities maintain both legal recognition and practical control over their resources. Cultural resilience is fostered through education, festivals, and arts. The bucklog, storytelling sessions, and traditional crafts are actively taught and performed, ensuring that young Subanen experience living culture rather than a static historical memory. The Imbing Clan encourages adaptation where necessary, allowing traditions to evolve while retaining their core ethical and spiritual principles. Looking forward, the Imbing legacy offers a vision of sustainable, culturally grounded leadership. By bridging past and present, tradition and innovation, community welfare, and individual growth, the Imbing Clan ensures that Subanen identity remains vibrant. Their story teaches that heritage is not frozen. It is a living, evolving force embodied in every act of stewardship, education, and cultural transmission. The Imbing name continues to inspire not only the Subanen of Lapuyan, but also a wider audience seeking lessons in resilience, balance, and the enduring power of ancestral wisdom. Thank you for listening this journey into the story of the Imbing Clan here on History Teller YT. Today, we learned about the ancestral line of leadership from Gumabongabon, Dajanding, and Balas to the more recent leaders like Timuay Imbing, Datu Lumok, and Mangura Vicente. We explored how the Imbing Clan preserved the Gukum, upheld justice, led rituals, safeguarded ancestral lands, and adapted to the modern world without losing their identity. We also discovered the importance of education, oral tradition, festivals, arts, and environmental stewardship, all interwoven into the Subanen way of life, showing us that leadership is about wisdom, cultural responsibility, and community service. The moral of the story is clear. True strength lies in balancing tradition with progress, respecting the past while shaping the future, and guiding a community with integrity and foresight. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Subanen heritage and the enduring legacy of the Imbing Clan, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join us again here on History Teller YT, where we bring untold stories of the past to life, inspire curiosity, and celebrate the rich tapestry of human history. Until next time, let the past teach you, the present guide you, and the future inspire you.